Halliburton, for Lockheed, for Gilead Sciences, for the key, for Bechtel. And it's been a failure. This has been a disaster. We need to ask for who, because for Halliburton, for Lockheed, for Gilead Sciences, for the key, for Bechtel, and another figure who was really very prominent
You're talking
in
about
beating the drums of war.
You're talking about a very narrow sector of the whole economy, but one in which...
But I'm talking about the people who really created the case for this war. I mean, the Committee for the Liberation of Iraq was created by a former vice president of Lockheed Martin who didn't have to sell his shares. George Shultz was the chair of that committee, and he was on the board of Bechtel the whole time. So yeah, I realize it seems simplistic and obvious, but I believe that
I'm going to have to cut you off because we're going to have to take a quick break, but we will after the...
Klein and Franklin 4 continues.
It's been a failure on some levels, maybe not all levels for disaster capitalism. What are the implications of the parts of the war that have been a failure for this theory?
Well, I mean, I do think that it has been chastening in terms of that cracking open that part to distort policy, because they have an active economic interest in continued instability. And I think that what we're seeing, and what's quite worrying, is I talk in the book about the Davos dilemma, and this was discussed at this year's World Economic Summit in Davos. Every year there's sort of a buzzword, and this past year it was the Davos dilemma. And what was the Davos dilemma? Well, according to Martin Wolf, a columnist in the Financial Times, he described the Davos dilemma as the paradox that the world was becoming more unstable, more crisis-prone, basically going to hell in a handbasket, high oil prices, war in Iraq, potential of a nuclear strike on Iran, climate change, Middle East crisis, and so on and so on. But at the same time, the stock market was doing very, very well, and there were record levels of economic growth. So this was the Davos dilemma. What is this paradox between between political crisis and economic
Isn't it interesting that in this kind of heart of the...
wasn't even identified as a sector before September 11th, is now worth $200 billion. And
elite. And a lot of other parts of the elite find this to be troubling and against their interests.
I think that's absolutely true, but it is an extraordinarily politically connected part of that elite, and I think you see that very clearly in Washington and the Homeland Security complex. This is really a sector of the economy that wasn't even identified as a sector before September 11th, is now worth $200 billion, and that economy is utterly embedded in Washington lobbying.